Book 2, Part 3 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Raven Notation. Metamorphoses by Publius Ovidius Naso. Translated by Brooks Moore. Book 2, Part 3. Chiron, the centaur, taught his pupil, proud that he was honored by that godlike charge. Behold his lovely daughter, who was born beside the margin of a rapid stream, came forward, with her yellow hair as gold adorn her shoulders. She was known by name Ocyprhoe. The hidden things that fate conceals, she had the power to tell, for not content was she to learn her father's arts, but rather pondered on mysterious things. So when the god of frenzy warmed her breast, gazing on Aesculapius, the child of Phoebus and Coronis, while her soul was gifted with prophetic voice, she said, O thou, who wilt bestow on all the world the blessed boon of health, increase in strength, to thee shall mortals often owe their lives. To thee is given the power to raise the dead. But when against the power of deities thou shalt presume to dare thy mortal skill, the bolts of Jove will shatter thy great might, and health no more be thine from thence to grant. And from a god thou shalt return to dust, and once again from dust become a god, and thou shalt thus renew thy destiny. And thou, dear Father Chiron, brought to birth with pledge of an immortal life, informed with ever-during strength, when biting flames of torment from the baneful serpent's blood are coursing in thy veins, thou shalt implore a welcome death, and thy immortal life the gods shall suffer to the power of death, and the three destinies shall cut thy thread. She would continue these prophetic words, but tears unbidden trickled down her face, and, as it seemed her sighs would break her heart, she thus bewailed, The fates constrain my speech, and I can say no more. My power has gone. Alas, my art, although of little force and doubtful worth, has brought upon my head the wrath of heaven. O wherefore did I know to cast the future? Now my human form puts on another shape, and the long grass affords me needed nourishment. I want to range the boundless plains, and have become, in image of my father's kind, a mare. But gaining this, why lose my human shape? My father's form is one of twain combined. And as she wailed, the words became confused and scarcely understood, and soon her speech was only as the whining of a mare. Down to the meadows green her arms were stretched, her fingers joined together, and smooth hoofs made of 5 nails a single piece of horn. Her face and neck were lengthened, and her hair swept downward as a tail. The scattered locks that clung around her neck were made a mane, tossed over to the right. Her voice and shape were altogether changed, and since that day the change has given her a different name. In vain her hero father, Chiron, prayed the glorious god Apollo her to aid. He could not thwart the will of mighty Jove, and if the power were his, far from the spot, from thence afar his footsteps trod the fields of Elis and Messenia, far from thence. Now, while Apollo wandered on those plains, his shoulders covered with a shepherd's skin, his left hand holding his long shepherd's staff, his right hand busied with the 7 reeds of 7 sizes, brooding over the death of Hymenaeus, lost from his delight, while mournful ditties on the reeds were tuned, his kine, forgotten, strayed away to graze over the plains of Pylos. Mercury observed them, unattended, and from thence drove them away and hid them in the forest. So deftly did he steal them, no one knew or noticed save an ancient forester, well known to all the neighbor folk, by them called Battus. He was keeper of that wood, and that green pasture where the blooded mares of rich Neleus grazed. As Mercury distrusted him, he led him to one side and said, "Good stranger, whosoever thou art, if any one should haply question thee, if thou hast seen these kine, deny it all, and for thy good will, ere the deed is done, I give as thy reward this handsome cow." Now when the gift was his, old Battus said, "Go hence in safety, if it be thy will, and should my tongue betray thee, let that stone make mention of the theft." And as he spoke, he pointed to a stone. The son of Jove pretended to depart, but quickly changed his voice and features, and retraced his steps, and thus again addressed that ancient man: "Kind sir, if thou wouldst earn a fair reward, a heifer and a bull, if thou hast seen some cattle pass, I pray thee give thy help, and tell me of the theft." So the reward was doubled, and the old man answered him, "Beyond those hills they be," and so they were beyond those hills. And laughing, Mercury said, "Thou treacherous man, to me dost thou betray myself? Dost thou bewray me to myself?" The god indignant turned his perjured breast into a stone, which even now is called the Spy of Pylos, a disgraceful name, derived from days of old, but undeserved. High in the dome of heaven, behold the bright caduceus bearer soared on balanced wings, and far below him through a fruitful grove, devoted to Minerva's hallowed reign, some virgins bearing on their lovely heads, in wicker baskets wreathed and decked with flowers, their sacred offerings to the citadel of that chaste goddess. And the winged god, while circling in the clear unbounded skies, beheld that train of virgins, beautiful, as they were thence returning on their way. Not forward on a level line he flew, but wheeled in circles round. Lo, the swift kite swoops round the smoking entrails, while the priests enclose in guarded ranks their sacrifice. Wary with fear, that swiftest of all birds dares not to venture from his vantage height, but greedily hovers on his waving wings around his keen desire. So the bright god circled those towers, Actaeon, round and round, in mazy circles, greedy as the bird. As much as Lucifer outshines the stars that emulate the glory of his rays, as greatly as bright Phoebe pales thy light, O lustrous Lucifer, so far surpassed in beauty the fair maiden Herse, all those lovely virgins of that sacred train, departing joyous from Minerva's grove. The son of Jove, astonished, while he wheeled on balanced pinions through the yielding air, burned hot, as oft from Balearic sling the leaden missile, hurled with sudden force, burns in a glowing heat beneath the clouds. Then sloped the god his course from airy height, and turned a different way. Another way he went without disguise, in confidence of his celestial grace. But though he knew his face was beautiful, he combed his hair, and fixed his flowing raiment that the fringe of radiant gold appeared, and in his hand he waved his long smooth wand, with which he gives the wakeful sleep, or waketh ridden eyes. He proudly glanced upon his twinkling feet, that sparkled with their scintillating wings. In a secluded part of that great fane, devoted to Minerva's hallowed rites, 3 chambers were adorned with tortoise shell, and ivory, and precious woods inlaid, and there, devoted to Minerva's praise, 3 well-known sisters dwelt. A Upon the right dwelt Pandrosus, and over on the left Aglauros dwelt, and Herse occupied the room between those two. When Mercury drew near to them, Aglauros first espied the god, and ventured to inquire his name, and wherefore he was come. Then gracious spoke to her in answer the bright son of Jove: "Behold the god who carries through the air the mandates of almighty Jupiter. But I come hither not to waste my time in idle words, but rather to beseech thy kindness and good aid, that I may win the love of thy devoted sister Herse." Aglauros, on the son of Jupiter, gazed with those eyes that only lately viewed the guarded secret of the yellow-haired Minerva, and demanded as her price gold of great weight, before he paid denied admittance of the house. Minerva turned, with orbs of stern displeasure, towards the maid Aglauros, and her bosom heaved with sighs so deeply labored that her aegis shield was shaken on her valiant breast. For she remembered when Aglauros gave to view her charge with impious hand that monster form without a mother, maugre nature's law, what time the god who dwells on Lemnos loved. Now to requite the god and sister, her to punish whose demand of gold was great, Minerva to the cave of envy sped. Dark, hideous with black gore, her dread abode is hidden in the deepest hollowed cave, in utmost limits where the genial sun may never shine, and where the breathing winds may never venture, dismal, bitter cold, untempered by the warmth of welcome fires, involved forever in abounding gloom. When the fair champion came to this abode, she stood before its entrance, for she deemed it not a lawful thing to enter there, and she whose arm is mortal to her foes struck the black door-posts with her pointed spear, and shook them to the centre. Straight the doors flew open, and behold, within was envy, ravening the flesh of vipers, self-begot, the nutriment of her depraved desires. When the great goddess met her evil gaze, she turned her eyes away. But envy, slow, in sluggish languor, from the ground uprose, and left the scattered serpents half devoured, then moving with a sullen pace approached. And when she saw the gracious goddess, girt with beauty and resplendent in her arms, she groaned aloud and fetched up heavy sighs. Her face is pale, her body long and lean, her shifting eyes glance to the left and right, her snaggle teeth are covered with black rust, her hanging paps overflow with bitter gall, her slaver tongue drips venom to the ground. Busy in schemes and watchful in dark snares, sweet sleep is banished from her bloodshot eyes. Her smiles are only seen when others weep. With sorrow she observes the fortunate, and pines away as she beholds their joy. Her own existence is her punishment, and while tormenting she torments herself. Although Minerva held her in deep scorn, she thus commanded her with winged words: "Instill thy poison in Aglauros, child of Cecrops. I command thee, do my will." She spake, and spurning with her spear the ground departed. And the sad and furtive-eyed envy observed her in her glorious flight. She murmured at the goddess, great in arms, but waiting not, she took in hand her staff, which bands of thorns encircled as a wreath, and veiled in midnight clouds departed thence. She blasted on her way the ripening fields, scorched the green meadows starred with flowers, and breathed a pestilence throughout the land and the great cities. when her eyes beheld the glorious citadel of Athens, great in art and wealth, abode of joyful peace, she hardly could refrain from shedding tears, that nothing might be witnessed worthy tears. She sought the chamber where Aglauros slept, and hastened to obey the god's behest. She touched the maiden's bosom with her hands, foul with corrupting stains, and pierced her heart with jagged thorns, and breathed upon her face a noxious venom, and distilled through all the marrow of her bones, and in her lungs, a poison blacker than the ooze of pitch. And lest the canker of her poisoned soul might spread unchecked throughout increasing space, she caused a vision of her sister's form to rise before her, happy with the god who shone in his celestial beauty. All appeared more beautiful than real life. When the most wretched daughter of Cecrops had seen the vision, secret torment seized on all her vitals, and she groaned aloud, tormented by her frenzy day and night. A slow consumption wasted her away, as ice is melted by the slant sunbeam, when the cool clouds are flitting in the sky. If she but thought of Herse's happiness, she burned, as thorny bushes are consumed with smouldering embers under steaming stems. She could not bear to see her sister's joy, and longed for death, an end of misery, or schemed to end the torture of her mind by telling all she knew in shameful words, whispered to her austere and upright sire. But after many agonizing hours, she sat before the threshold of their home to intercept the god, who, as he neared, spoke softly in smooth blandishment. "Enough," she said. "I will not move from here until thou hast departed from my sight." "Let us adhere to that which was agreed," rejoined the graceful form Cyllenian god, who as he spoke thrust open with a touch of his compelling wand the carved door. But when she made an effort to arise, her thighs felt heavy, rigid, and benumbed, and as she struggled to arise, her knees were stiffened, and her nails turned pale and cold. Her veins grew pallid as the blood congealed, and even as the dreaded cancer spreads through all the body, adding to its taint the flesh uninjured, so a deadly chill entered by slow degrees her breast, and stopped her breathing and the passages of life. She did not try to speak, but had she made an effort to complain, there was not left a passage for her voice. Her neck was changed to rigid stone, her countenance felt hard. She sat a bloodless statue, but of stone not marble white. Her mind had stained it black. So from the land of Pallas went the god, his great revenge accomplished on the head of impious Aglauros, and he soared on waving wings into the open skies, and there his father called him to his side, and said, with words to hide his passion, "Son, thou faithful minister of my commands, let naught delay thee. Swiftly take the way accustomed to the land of Sidon, which adores thy mother's star upon the left. When there, drive over to the sounding shore that royal herd which far away is fed on mountain grass." He spoke, and instantly the herd was driven from the mountain side, then headed for the shore, as Jove desired, to where the great king's daughter often went in play, attended by the maids of Tyre. Can love abide the majesty of kings? Love cannot always dwell upon a throne. Jove laid aside his glorious dignity, for he assumed the semblance of a bull, and mingled with the bullocks in the groves, his color white as virgin snow, untrod, unmelted by the watery southern wind. His neck was thick with muscles, dewlaps hung between his shoulders, and his polished horns, so small and beautifully set, appeared the artifice of man, fashioned as fair and more transparent than a lucent gem. His forehead was not lowered for attack, nor was there fury in his open eyes. The love of peace was in his countenance. When she beheld his beauty and mild eyes, the daughter of Aglauros was amazed, but, daring not to touch him, stood apart until her virgin fears were quieted. Then, near him, fragrant flowers in her hand she offered, tempting to his gentle mouth. And then the loving god in his great joy kissed her sweet hands and could not wait her will. Jove then began to frisk upon the grass, or laid his snow-white side on the smooth sand, yellow and golden. As her courage grew, he gave his breast one moment for caress, or bent his head for garlands newly made, wreathed for his polished horns. The royal maid, unwitting what she did, at length sat down upon the bull's broad back. Then by degrees the god moved from the land and from the shore, and placed his feet, that seemed but shining hooves, in shallow water by the sandy merge, and not a moment resting before her thence, across the surface of the middle sea, while she affrighted gazed upon the shore, so fast receding. And she held his horn with her right hand, and, steadied by the left, held on his ample back, and in the breeze her waving garments fluttered as they went. End of Book 2, Part 3.